Leave your comments on the Ask Reddit sub, and I'll read your answers on the next episode of LWIAR 2. What is the scariest story you know that is 100% true? You sending him to the ER probably helped with the police getting a hold of him. And even then, didn't know how he'd been injured. He just saw an injured person and his first reaction was to help him. That's definitely a good thing, even if the guy ended up being a filthy kiddie rapist. Exactly. The vast majority of people are not murderers, rapists or pedophiles, so the fact Op's instinct was to help a fellow human just proves that Op is probably a pretty good person. And even further, they aided in the capture of a dangerous criminal. They could have ignored it and kicked him out of the store, allowing the guy potentially continue to be a gross predator. Just imagine swimming or standing near a lake and it just randomly starts fizzing like someone shook and opened a giant can of soda. That's basically what happened. Some lakes have fountains in them to prevent this from happening. Scientists concluded from evidence that a 100 meters, 330 feet, column of water and foam formed at the surface of the lake, spawning a wave of at least 25 meters, 82 feet, that swept the shore on one side. From the article on Lake Nyos, that describes the CO2 eruption. I'm sure you're right that some lakes will just fizzle, but to produce any CO2 to displace the O2 from an entire village, there will be something a little more exciting. There once was a lake. Years passed. It's barely all filled up with gas. An eruption of sorts produced many a corpse. But the lake sure thought it was a blast. Edit. Fixed the formatting. And hooray for my first gold. Thank you. My science teacher in high school was in the Peace Corps and one of the first people to come across this village after it happened. He said it was so eerie because all the flies and mosquitoes had died and it was so silent. All the flies and mosquitoes had died. This scares me far more than the death of the people and livestock, because no matter where you go, you always expect for at least one fly or mosquito to be there. But to find even those things dead, my god. If the cockroaches die, then it's all over. It wasn't just a ditch. It was a steep embankment where the highway had been built up. Approximately 30 feet deep, she climbed up 30 steep, rocky feet after having her forearms chopped off and being brutally raped and survived. Bad, but SSDGM. A complete lack of empathy. The dude is a genuine psychopath. After his release, the prosecutor said he felt no guilt, didn't even feel responsible, described himself as a muddle-headed old man, and wouldn't agree never to do it again. Which makes it even more shocking he was released. He literally wouldn't agree not to rape and cut people's arms off. And the justice system was like, we'll just give her and see how she goes. What really upsets me most about this what absolutely freaking infuriates me about this. I think in these scenarios we can safely say that if you can rape someone, chop their freaking arms off and leave them to die, you aren't ever safe to be released. Probably something along the lines of, we're not making any money off this guy, get him the frick out of my prison. Don't use your outrage about his brutal crime to justify inhumane treatment of prisoners in general. Our system has become monstrous. Fun fact, his original family home, the one where he murdered his family and left their corpses to rot, had a previously unnoticed original Tiffany stained glasses window worth around $500,000. He cited financial strain, not wanting his family if he was broke as part of the reason for murdering them. Whoopsie. I remember that. The forensic artist picked a pair of really dorky glasses for the model. For some reason they just looked right. As if the man the model represented would wear these boring, middle-aged man glasses. Based on his psych profile, he was arrested wearing the exact same frames. Oh, sweetie, you'll like this one, it's based on a true story. What did the letter say that he left? He pretty much explained that he killed his family to ensure their entry into heaven because he was worried they were straying from their faith. So in a way, he thought he was saving their souls. A lot of what Mao Zedong did during the Great Leap can be attributed to this actually. For example, killing of all these birds. The intention was to make the birds eat fewer seeds and thus increased farming output to help against hunger. The result was the birds not eating the bugs, resulting in massive crop failure. Yeah, I agree, and people are going to hate me for saying it, but rape is bad. Not trying to make light of the story or anything, but he actually had condoms. Never thought of a rapist doing protected sex. So how'd he frick up? Pubic hair? Did he leave traces of his cum? Okay, warded pulley. What I meant to say was, how'd they link him to the other rapes if he wore condoms and left little to no evidence? Edit 2. Op has shared that he got scratched by his previous victims. That's how the police got his DNA, and matched it to him when he got caught. Rule number 2. Double tap. Rule number 3. Beware of bathrooms. Holy crap, this is horrifying. What a smart woman. My family has a similar story, and I'm pretty sure some of you serial killer buffs out there might figure out who it is before the reveal, because their story is pretty unique. When my parents were in college, they went on a trip down to Florida. They had met through mutual friends and were down there together but hadn't gone on a date yet. My dad and one of his friends were planning to meet my mom and some of her friends at a hotel, but being the carefree college guys they lost track of time and realized it was impossible to get to the hotel on time by walking. They decided the best solution to their problem was to hitchhike, and a car with 2 women picked him up. Everything seemed fine until the driver asked them if it was okay to stop for gas. My dad and his friend agreed it was no problem since they were making good time, and she drove into a gas station. She then pumped her car full of gas before hopping back in and flooring it, basically stealing the gas with 2 hitchhikers in the back. My dad and his friend were beginning to freak out when she pulled a gun from under her seat and asked, "Are we gonna have a problem?" or something like that. My dad and his friend shook their heads vehemently, because what else do you do in that situation? She then drove them to the hotel and dropped them off without so much as a scratch, and they kinda thought nothing of it until the news started reporting on a serial killer in Florida known as Aileen Wuornos. He took one look at her picture and instantly recognized her as the driver. The only reason my dad thinks she didn't straight up kill them was because they were super polite and respectful to her, and her victims were usually scumbag guys trying to take advantage of her. TL. Dr. Aileen Wuornos is the reason my dad got to his first date with mom on time. Edit. Spelling. It does sound like something an elementary kid makes up. Right. He had his brain eaten from the inside out. At first he couldn't smell. Then he couldn't talk. Then he was dead. Rabies is possibly the worst way to go that I can think of. Except maybe tetanus. Spasming so hard you break your own back. No thanks. Yep, the amoeba needs to come into contact with the top of your nose. So you have to snort the water. Or, if you happen to live in Louisiana in 2013, they weren't using enough shoreline in the water supply, so people using neti pots with tap water were exposed. The good news is that the brain eaters really like specific conditions. They like very warm, ATF+, stagnant water with 0 salt or chlorine. So even a little bit of chlorine or bromine is enough to protect yourself. In the US, only lakes in the South, Texas, Louisiana, Florida, Georgia, etc. meet those conditions, and humans don't want to spend a lot of time in that water since it's usually pretty gross. Even then, you still have to get the water up your nose. Water skiing or jet skiing are the 2 common causes. Edit. Also cases in MN at AZ. Interestingly, there was a guy here who did an armor about a treatment. You just have to move quickly, because once a person loses their sense of smell, it's already over, because the amoeba have eaten your olfactory bulb, the part of your brain responsible for smelling. Then it continues eating, and eventually ends up at your brain stem, which controls things like breathing and heart rate. I'm now testing my smelling abilities just to convince myself I don't have this. I mean, I don't have any of the other symptoms either, but my irrational brain just has to confirm that I really don't have it. If your sense of smell is too good, smell sensitivity may be a sign of pregnancy. 3 sailors survived the sinking of the USS West Virginia at Pearl Harbor, only to die 16 days later. Due to the lack of air, the Navy knew they were there, but couldn't get to them. 16 days to die. I mean, I'm sure listening to your friends die trapped is horrible, but yeah, I'd definitely go with the trap guys slowly running out of air having it worse. 3 days in complete darkness. My dad and some friends got drunk and went for a drive on some back roads and were going as fast as the truck would go as teenagers. My dad was slightly less drunk than the others and eventually demanded they let him get out. They pulled over and he and one other girl got out. He and the girl started walking to town while the other three sped off in the opposite direction. Well, less than a mile up the road from where they got out is an extremely sharp turn, which they missed and hit a tree going pretty close to triple digits miles per hour. Two of them died on impact and the only reason the third survived is because they crashed in front of a house that two doctors lived in. The survivor was paralyzed and lost his leg and part of his arm and was in the hospital for 8 months before dying. This was in the 60s, so medical care wasn't what it is today. When I first got my permit, my dad took me to that corner to explain the importance of safe driving. It gave me goosebumps about how close he was to being in the truck. He said that the dad of the driver got what remained of the truck to be hung up in the center of town for months after to be a warning to all. This is a hometown story that stayed with me. It happened literally right around the corner from where I grew up. Maybe a 2-minute drive away. Judy Kirby murdered 6 children and 1 adult by intentionally driving the wrong way on a divided highway in an attempt to commit suicide. She had been hospitalized for depression, but had also just ended a relationship with her ex-husband's brother and was, by some reports, involved in drug trafficking, and fearing an imminent arrest, she picked up her sister's son, who was celebrating his 10th birthday that day. She then loaded her 3 children into the car, supposedly to pick up a gift for the nephew. Instead, she went missing with the carload of kids. A short time later, calls started coming into 911 about a car going the wrong way down the highway at a high rate of speed. They made it to about 90 seconds before a head-on collision with another vehicle, driven by a father with 2 children and another child along for the ride. The crash annihilated both vehicles. The only survivors were Kirby herself, and the child who was along for the ride in the other car. There were pieces of children all over the highway. She was sentenced to 215 years in prison. I look at my baby son playing on the floor, and just can't imagine what goes so wrong in your life mind that you come up with that solution. My God, you'd float on the surface for a moment. I have to believe, that the searing temperatures would have ended it extremely quickly. But, yeah, I don't think I've ever repeated this story before. You know, sharing it with all of Reddit. It really messed with my head as a kid. Steel melted 1370C. They probably felt a pinch when all the water in their bodies turned into steam, and that's it. Years ago when I was 8, my family lived in this big weird house kind of on the edge of a small town. The school district was in the middle of a big restructuring, so even though we were only a couple grades apart, my brother and I went to different schools and took different buses. This left me as the last person to leave in the morning and the first person to get home in the afternoon, which meant it was my job to make sure all the lights were off and the door was locked. One morning I noticed the basement door was open and the light was on, so before I left I turned off the light and closed the door. When I got home that afternoon, the light was on and the door was open again. I just assumed that I'd forgotten to actually take care of it when I noticed it in the morning, so I went over to turn off the light and close the door. When I got to the top of the basement stairs, I looked and there was a big shadowy male figure towards the bottom of the staircase. I freaked out, slammed the door and pushed a bunch of boxes against it, and then went and hid in my closet. For months I didn't tell my family because I was positive what I had seen was a ghost and didn't think anyone would believe me. Then about a year after that incident, my mom and her boyfriend realized that small amounts of money had been going missing for months, totaling around $800 minus $900, but never more than $60 at once. So we all walked around the house with flashlights trying to figure out how they could have gotten in. Turns out some creep was climbing in through a small hole in the outside of the house, shimmying through a crawl space, then coming up into the house through the basement. Realizing I had been alone in the house with him on at least one occasion was one of the worst, most terrifying moments I've ever had. Edit. Whoa, this blew up way more than I expected. I'm doing my best to respond to comments, questions. Sorry if I end up missing yours. Home invasion is seriously one of the scariest things that can happen to a person. The home is like a final refuge from the world, and to have it violated like that is so unnerving. My brother's ex-GF had 2 older sisters. They died before she was born. One day they decided to play hide and seek or something. So anyway, they both climbed inside a chest and accidentally locked themselves in. They suffocated. That really sucks. When I was a kid there were a lot of PSA type things about kids not playing in abandoned refrigerators for that reason. That is terrifying. It's particularly terrifying to me because I remember when I was younger something similar almost happened to me and my cousin. She had a daybed and we decided to get behind it and push it against the wall so we could play and nap in the dark. It got unbearably hot and we realized we couldn't breathe after about 30 minutes. If it wouldn't have also gotten so hot from our fear, body heat, lack of oxygen, we might have actually suffocated because we were getting lightheaded. It was scary, but eventually we pulled the bed away from the wall. I have no idea how that could happen on carpet. Bizarre freak accidents are just so strange. I'm truly sorry for you, brothers XGF. Edit. thebedi.imager.com. I would have to have a cyanide capsule to take in case I got really stuck and couldn't get out. So I'm never going spelunking, scuba diving, skydiving. I don't even drive fast because I'm worried about getting hurt. Well, at least in skydiving it would be a quick death as you go head first. I can't even get my noodles to my mouth without dripping some on myself. Think I'll pass on this career path. Wouldn't you wear more protective gloves when handling such a dangerous chemical? I knew that was gonna be a Chubyamu video. Nope. I can handle a lot of crap but his videos make me viscerally uncomfortable. I simply cannot watch them. I've never watched any. Why do they squick you out? He passed her away. I think what's more scary than this is that stories like this are a dime a dozen. Holy crap. Also on first reading I thought the baby screamed and was still alive. Me too. Made the rest of the story tame by comparison. Yes, I found it. After about 3 hours. Wasn't a fully formed baby yet. But it was pretty disturbing to find. All the other stuff I had to sift through was just the icing on the cake. Oh, I was fully decked out in my scuba suit. I also showered for an hour after with some bleach. I was in a nice little area with a swamp pool and all the big wigs watching me. I wasn't forced to do this. I stepped in because no one on shift was willing to. If I hadn't done it there would have been a fine to the hospital. There was also some incentive to do this. I got to go home early and got some really hefty gift cards. And sauces too. This reminds me of the guy who got cooked with the tuna. Or the guys who got cooked in the bread conveyor. Yikes. Not 100% on the details but I think it was a big can tuna factory where they cook all the tuna en masse in cans in a room and a guy got locked in a room with the cans. See, I was thinking he got cooked into the tuna. My BF works in a coal mine and told me that there are places where taking a crap can kill you. Like in the story above. The oxygen level at head height is fine. But there's carbon monoxide closer to the ground. You squat to take a crap and die. Edit. Actually it's carbon dioxide not monoxide. Thank you for telling me. Sorry for the confusion. Thanks for watching LWIAR 2. The best of all time r/AskReddit submissions and comments. If you like this video, check out the original LWIAR channel. And don't forget to like and subscribe.